Okay, I'm going to call the meeting to order at 7:04. Welcome, everybody. I don't see any visitors. Maybe we can come back if someone shows up and wants to make a comment. The next thing on the agenda is the approval of last month's minutes, and I think it was the four of us, so we're all eligible to vote. Is there a motion to approve the minutes from April 7?
I'll make the motion.
Okay,
I guess I'll second it.
okay.
Yeah.
All right, well, I can see where the vote's going. Okay, is there any discussion before we vote on the minutes? Okay, all in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
All opposed, any abstentions? Okay, that's 4-0, approval, thank you. And then that brings us to, really the big part of our agenda tonight. So again, it's like last time, it's the four of us, so, I think you guys were all game last time to go on and have our discussion, so I think we will. We are a quorum, and, you know, I'm always hesitant for, 4 of the 6 to really make any binding decisions, but, let's go ahead and see what happens. So, I think at the end of last month's meeting, mostly with Michelle's suggestion, we went through and I highlighted maybe 10, looks like 10 sections for discussion of Gail's working copy, right? Is everybody on board with that?
Yeah.
All right, and so unless there's another suggestion, we can just go right down that list. And the first one that we highlighted was Section 3 core values. And I'll just say, since I'm sort of on a roll of talking, I'll keep talking for a second. I think the Section 3 core values is fine. I don't think there's anything, that I would edit on it necessarily. However, I think it's probably duplicative of Section 1, or maybe we could add, if we don't think it's 100% duplicative, maybe we could pull something out and put it in there. I don't think we need Section 1 and Section 3, but that's just my thought.
I agree with you. I looked at it and said this is redundant, and we could either consolidate it. Again, it just appeared to be redundant. Perhaps moving even Section 3 to Section 1.
Any other thoughts from either of you guys?
I am just re-looking through it super quickly.
All right, take your time. And
I agree. I mean, it's sort of covered in 1. I don't know that there are any additional. I'm just kind of like looking for words or phrases that might need to be popped into 1 from 3. Ethical standards of commerce, affairs, decisions without favoritism, acceptable practices, orderly procedures, and 3 talks about the core values, fairness. Yeah, I don't know that I think anything needs to be from 3 even needs to go into 1, if you were asking me.
very good. Hey, Gail, did you post that?
Post it? I
We,
tried to share it. But
it's
not
working.
seeing it.
Oh,
It is?
but we can see it here.
That's funny. I can't see it.
Michelle, can you see it?
Yeah, I can actually. Did I share
Okay.
it? I don't think
No,
so.
I tried to share it, but I don't see it on my end. That's the funny thing.
Oh, well, it's here. It might, maybe
Okay.
your view is
Yeah. Well, thank you, Gail.
is not
So,
allowing
Gail,
you to do that.
So, Gail, I don't want to put you on the spot because you're the one who's put together a couple different versions of this code of ethics for us. So again, thank you very much for that. So now that we've sort of said, well, we think 1 and 3 are redundant. I should have asked you first, I guess, but you put them both in the working copy. What
Right.
was the thought there?
What do you mean by that?
Well, I mean, we think they're redundant and maybe you didn't
Oh.
when you put them there.
Yeah, no, I mean, I really just was trying to put in a section for everything that I saw
that you
in
found.
other towns' ethics, just on the off chance that we wanted to, keep them all, but,
Got it. Got it.
it wasn't like a lot of thought that went into it on my end, so.
Well, I don't agree with that part. But yeah, I see you, and I get your method. You wanted to put as many things in front of us as possible to
Exactly.
provoke, yeah, discussion and conversation. Very good. Now, having said that, do you have any other thought on whether you agree with us or disagree or want to make another pitch for keeping section 3 in there? Or do you agree with us that you might be redundant with section 1?
Let me just double check. Yeah, I mean, I feel like it's kind of self-explanatory, and like you said, it is redundant. So we could get rid of section 3 altogether, I think.
Yeah, okay, all right. Okay, all right.
Hey,
So now, go ahead.
can I make a suggestion, Gail? Oh, I know you cut it. Can we just do a strike through instead right now, just in case? Like, I know Derek just joined, just in case anyone,
Okay.
I don't know. It feels very permanent to take it out. And just so that we have a little bit of a record
Sure.
of what we decided. I mean, Rob, are you okay with that? And then
Very
maybe,
good. Yeah, I'm glad you caught that. Yeah, very good. And Gail's already done it. I can see on the screen.
yep, yeah,
So,
thank you.
very good. And welcome, Derek. Can you hear us and see us?
Can hear you and I can see you. I've got an awfully feeble internet connection here that seems to go away literally when the wind blows. So I'm going to
All right.
stay with you as long as I can.
Okay, very good. Well, maybe you heard part of the conversation there and if you have the agenda in front of you, we identified, I don't know, 10 or so sections to look at tonight, sort of in chronological order of Gail's most recent working copy that she put together for us that's posted. And we've just sort of, the four of us, you're number 5 now, Karen's not with us at the moment. We've sort of agreed that in principle that section 3 core values is redundant to section 1 purpose and establishment. Do you have any other thought? Okay, very good. I see a thumbs up. Okay. So now, if someone wants to make a comment on anything between section 3 and where we're going to go next, pipe in and let us know. But the next one on the agenda is section 7, disclosure of financial interests. So we're sort of skipping gifts and favors and conflict of interest.
And we must have gotten rid of 6 or we misnumbered or something, because we go from 5 to 7.
Oh, okay.
That's all right. We can fix that at the last minute. I just wanted to, I couldn't remember if we got rid of it. That might be a.
I think it would.
If we get rid of
think
section 3, it'll be misnumbered anyway, so.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah,
I think
but
it was-
again, I wouldn't get rid of it because tonight we have to talk through based on the numbers.
Right, that's
No.
true. Okay, I won't change anymore. Okay, so 7.
Yeah, disclosure, that's right, disclosure, I'll try and do both, section 7, disclosure of financial interest. Yeah, and Michelle, I think that there just wasn't a section 6 that sort
Yeah.
of made it to us, nothing's been taken away, so. All right, oh, here we are. Section 7, financial interests. Oh, I think the reason to discuss this one is because it requires a filing.
Right,
And I think if you compare it with the one directly above it, which is section 5, conflict of interest, it talks about a similar concept, but
Mm,
I don't think there's sort of any dollar amount associated there. And we even talk about appearance of impropriety, et cetera, et cetera.
mm.
But I think the disclosure, well, Gail, you want to talk about the disclosure of financial interests? I don't want to put you on the spot. You don't have to, but I think
I
it was,
almost feel like it's not
self-identified.
necessary. I think, we can either modify or just leave conflict of interest as it is. And I think it kind of, I feel like it's almost redundant because it's, I don't know, like the conflict of interest is not engaging in something that would be like, you know, like having a financial interest in your position, so I don't know. I just feel like it's one more thing that the Ethics Commission is going to have to deal with all the time. Like not later than 30 days after the end of the fiscal year. And I don't know. I feel like it's kind of too much.
Yeah, any other thoughts?
And I would like to
Um,
keep it open-ended. If you go into disclosure and you speak about not, a dollar amount, I don't know if there's, any dollar amount that should not be disclosed if there is a conflict. So I'm thinking that the disclosure of financial interests, although, not specific in conflict, I think conflict is enough. In other words, section 5 to me appears to be enough.
Right, because towards the end of section 5, it says, like the, derive a direct monetary gain due to their official activity. This is a conflict of interest. And now we're almost saying like you can have a, a conflict of interest if you disclose it. It almost like it counters the conflict of interest section.
Well, yeah, go ahead, Derek.
Something to offer here is, I know I've missed at least the last one meeting, maybe the last two meetings, which is why I wanted to try hard to be on this one. So apologize to my colleagues here. But one thing that I think we talked about when I was last at one of these meetings, I think we're generally aware that if we write this thing up in too tight of a way, it is likely to be abused, meaning the ethics code is likely to be abused. We're setting the table for, those who wish to be, pursue nefarious purposes to be disruptive and distracting to government and, use it to just create chaos. And with that in mind, I just want to say that, sometimes the Latin term de minimis, which will resonate with my friend Rob Rimmer, is sometimes a friend. It is an undefined, non-specific term, but it basically means so small as to be unimportant.
Right.
If a contractor who has a snow plowing contract with the town of Killingworth buys the I hope I didn't just lose the internet.
Gail may
Okay,
have.
but
Oh, we
buys
lost
the director of public works or the foreman a cup of coffee at Dunkin' Donuts and it costs $1.25. Is it strictly, is it a conflict of interest? Of course it is. Is it so darn de minimis as to be unimportant and otherwise insignificant? I think so. You want to serve your larger purposes and not create barriers that people can, with good intentions or, certainly not bad intentions, might stumble over unintentionally.
And I would say that I would agree. It's the second section there is somewhat redundant. Gail, I don't know if you can try to share again at some point. That
Yeah.
was helpful.
Yes,
But,
something
but, I agree that we don't necessarily need a dollar amount. The two things that sort of jump out at me that I'm not as confident on are, do we mention a substantial, I think it says something like a substantial conflict of interest or something, or substantial gain. I don't know if we need to define what that is, or if we think it's going to be clear to everyone, or we just want to leave a certain amount of wiggle room. And then my other piece would be, is there any call to action we want to leave in this section, which I think is probably section, I don't know, I can't remember now, 7 maybe, or 4? I
5.
think maybe section 4. If somebody feels like they need to do or say something about a potential conflict.
Yeah, I think in some ways that happens already, so that on, planning and zoning and ZBA boards and things of that nature, if you're a neighbor or you've helped the person or whatever, that happens frequently, that someone will acknowledge that and then recuse him or herself from the hearing. I'm guessing, I don't really know of any specific examples, if I'm guessing, the selectmen would probably do a similar thing if, something like that came up. I guess that's one response to that. It's a disclosure in a way. It's not the written disclosure anticipated in section 7. And I think back to section, actually, okay, now it appears in section 4, conflict of interest, on what we're looking at on the screen. It says a couple things. It says no one shall have any interest. So that's any interest, but then it says, which is in substantial conflict with the, proper discharge of their
Right.
public duties or employment. And I think the commentary from Derek and Michelle, would be that, okay, that's in there, but I think Derek's like, hey, we kind of like that. And I think Michelle's asking, oh, do we like that? Not to put words in either of your mouths.
Yeah,
but,
substantial conflict is then open to interpretation, right? So, I don't like things that are open to interpretation as much being codified.
Yeah, I think a little bit of ambiguity and a little bit of vague language is, I absolutely respect what you're saying there, Michelle, because, if you're too loosey-goosey with it, that can be a problem too. But I guess what I was trying to advocate for was not just not having a dollar amount threshold level, because that's a bright line, but if you have the word any, then that $1.25 cup of coffee violates it. Right.
Mm. Well, I think it does say substantial conflict. Right?
Right, that's so
that's the
substantial
safety
conflict,
valve.
but
Yeah, that's the tension there that may be useful. To temper any interest, financial or otherwise, with substantial conflict, so that it's not, back to Derek's point, it's not the de minimis things.
Right.
Right. I guess my point is substantial conflict means different things to different people. So while we can all agree probably that the cup of coffee is not substantial, what about the, I don't know, free landscaping, the landscaping, which might be really substantial to one person and not substantial to somebody else.
Right.
Well, I think I will quibble with you on that one, Michelle, because I think these days that would probably be So, I mean, I don't know what people are thinking these days, but I feel like that one would be substantial to most people. I'm sure we could come up with some examples where we would have a better chance to disagree. And I see your
Yeah, I
point.
mean, yeah, you're right. I mean,
Yeah.
the dinner or something, maybe
Yeah.
somewhere like in the middle, right?
But I think the flip side of it is if we don't use words, we're gonna use numbers. And so if we put $200 or $500 or whatever, I guess by
Mm.
definition, we're saying it's okay to give someone $400, which I don't
Right,
think we
right.
wanna
I see
do.
what you're saying.
And then so there's some I don't know, lack of, clarity, I guess, with words like substantial conflict. And I'm guessing, Gail, that
Mhm.
probably, was borrowed from one
Oh,
or
yeah.
more of our sibling towns.
Right. I'm not a lawyer. I don't. These are all borrowed.
Yeah,
So here's a question, guys. Aren't we, just at a high level, keeping it simple or remembering our role here? Our charge is to create a code of ethics that works for the town and, in my mind, helps good people stay out of trouble, not necessarily catch people and
Right.
get them in trouble. But if the code does its job, it is written in such a way as to have a reasonable standard in place for what might constitute a violation. And if that is determined to be the case, then actions will be taken by the commission. But I think the role of the commission, and we're not the ethics commission, remind me again, Rob, our job is actually, we are the ethics commission, but by name, but we're only going to have a short life here, and another commission will take shape for the
That's right.
purposes of receiving and reviewing and, I guess, adjudicating, for lack of a better term, right? What I'm getting at here is, at some point in the future, somebody is going to see something, read what we've written, conclude that in their estimation, a violation has occurred, and then take that to that commission for its review and consideration, right? And that's not just going to be a software program. That's going to be a bunch of people who will exercise some amount of judgment and decide whether or not what is brought to their attention is indeed a violation. It is, I guess what I'm trying to say here is, it is okay, therefore, in my opinion, in my view, to have this be written in such a way as to allow for some amount of interpretation and judgment, which of course means that this will have a little bit of ambiguity to it in order for others on a future day to apply their judgment to it. Am I making a point that makes sense to anybody?
Yeah, I understand your point. I don't know that I agree with it, but I may end up in the same place, because as I look up the definition of conflict of interest, there's a federal United States Code 18, Section 208, that talks about federal employees being prohibited from participating personally and substantially in an official capacity. So I think that there's language that exists that someone could point to without, leaving it like it is in Section 4. So I guess what I'm saying is, I can agree with where Derek's ended up for a different reason, but yes.
Okay.
That's very fair. I love that.
Okay,
So
go
then
ahead.
I have one thought here, and that's that last sentence. One should avoid even the appearance of impropriety as it relates to this section. Do we consider the obligation of recusing oneself for voting purposes if there is an issue of appearance of impropriety.
Hmm. Yeah.
I mean, if it's improper, one should not be voting on something that may be in conflict with that person's background or issues.
I mean, I guess I would think that that makes perfect sense to me, but I guess I would think that if the person would not be in their position if there was a conflict, a substantial conflict of interest, and then wouldn't even be able to vote. But I mean,
That's an assumption.
yeah, that's true.
But you know what, we don't want to grind the place to a halt. Like, I was on the Board of Finance and I didn't, I want, people could want different things. Okay. One of the things I wanted our mill rate to stay low. All right, well, that was my personal interest. I mean, I'm sure I brought my personal, thoughts to the board. We're bringing all of our personal thoughts to the board tonight.
Mhm.
And I don't, I don't think that's what anyone's really talking about, but we don't want to fall down that hole either. And so what I guess the point of that, whether it made it, whether what I just said made any sense to anyone or not, is that I sort of like the substantial conflict language, I think.
I 100% understand what the point you were making there, Rob, and it wouldn't be hard for me to come up with a similar one. You can take these things to a point of absurdity, and yeah, we're trying to create what functions as common sense, so that when somebody runs afoul of something that is common sense, then, well, not just common sense, that, I'm sorry, I'm making light of it, but something that is workable for the town so that the wheels of government keep turning.
Yeah, I mean, I think the wheels of government keep continuing to turn is a valid argument. I think the common sense argument is very open to interpretation, and common sense is only as good as um, as the person holding them
I
at
heard
that time.
somebody say that common sense is not a flower that grows in every person's garden.
Oh, well, yeah, I suppose that's true. Or maybe there are different varieties of it or something, but,
And
so,
that's the point. That's the point well taken. What we look at as our moral, our personal moral conduct is being layered into an ethical conduct. So we have to be able to say, hey, if these things are happening and there is an issue here that could prevail or could slant perspective, then we ask these town officials to identify those issues, and the select board may ask them to recuse themselves from a vote.
yeah, that makes sense. So,
Do you like the sentence I added to section 4 at the end? Any financial interests should be disclosed, and in voting, one should recuse themselves if there is any potential conflict of interest. I feel like that puts it in there, but we're not saying like a dollar amount or how much. So like, what Derek is saying, it's vague, but it could be interpreted like in the future, like if somebody's going to have a substantial financial interest, they shouldn't vote, and they could also disclose it. We're not really saying to who or how, but it should just like be
Or
made
when.
known, like within the committee or however. Like I don't want to box us in to like very specific things and then it doesn't work with whatever officer that we're, you know what I'm saying? Like I think if we get
Mhm.
too specific, it may not work. Whereas I'm thinking like just like say like on a planning and zoning board, somebody should just be like, hey, that is my brother-in-law's landscaping business. So when we vote on who we're going to hire, I'm going to just excuse myself from the vote. You know, like just, you know, it doesn't have to be like a formal, like you need to file this at the town clerk's office, you know, you just, it's like kind of like Derek was saying, almost like a common sense, like don't put yourself in a situation where it looks like you're, you know, trying to gain money by your position in the town, basically.
Gail, I think you've got a very, very, very powerful sentence there, and it maybe should even be two separate thoughts.
Mhm.
But you know, the word any is what I'm trying to get away from, because I just think any invites that hypothetical $1.25 cup of coffee, right?
Yeah,
And
but we're not,
it,
we're also not saying that like, we're not, okay, so like who's gonna say, well, they accepted a coffee or a lunch and they bring that before the ethics committee or commission, the ethics commission is gonna be like, yeah, never mind, like, we don't feel this is, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
Like, who's
I-
gonna bring that?
but we don't, right, but we don't want to give someone I don't want to give my political
Gail,
opponent.
do I hear you saying, what knucklehead would ever do
Yeah,
Right.
that? Who would ever do that? That's so absurd on its face. Is there really a person in this town with a pulse who would bring forward a complaint over a cup of coffee?
Well, if they do, then there's no
Well,
probable cause,
all right,
right?
but
They'll
you
file
know,
the whole
if not,
thing and the ethics
but
commission will just ignore
yeah,
them.
but let's go back to that sentence because, yeah, can you get back to that?
Yeah.
Any financial interest should be disclosed. That's a powerful statement there, and I think it needs a little bit more substance on it, and I would advocate for something other than just the word any. And I think
Okay.
the task, the burden, or the charge that a person should recuse them, put on the record, fully disclose any conflict for the benefit of the record and but for the benefit of others on the board. We're and should recuse themselves and not vote on a matter that is related, that I just think that would be related or be impacted by potentially be impacted by the conflict tied to a financial interest, in which of course the financial interest could be a gift, right? It could be
Yeah,
financial interest can take a lot of different forms, as we know. We've talked about that. I think we have that defined, don't we?
yeah, you know what I think? I think that they're kind of long sentences, but the first two sentences of the conflict of interest section kind of hit these points. Like, I don't think we need another sentence at all.
There you go.
Okay.
There you go.
And
Less is more. Yep.
well,
except, so we should leave in the final line that was in there. I think that what I'm proposing is that section would have 3 sentences. The last one would be, one should avoid even the appearance of impropriety as it relates to this section. And that sentence beginning with the yellow any, like, yeah, we're okay without that, I think.
well, yeah, I before we get rid of that, I
Hmm.
want to make a point. So I think that I'm fine with substantial conflict of interest and these may not be the final words that I would choose if I had an opportunity to look at this for, a few minutes. But I do think there is benefit in articulating. We're not saying how anything should be disclosed. We're not saying what should be disclosed. So you know what? If you really think the cup of coffee should be disclosed, I tell Rob, someone bought me a cup of coffee and he says, that's not a big thing, Michelle. Or he says, you know what, Michelle, that is a big thing. Here's what should happen. Here's what we need to do next. Here's what you should do next. And I don't think it's a bad idea to give some guardrails, because these are not very specific. These are just guardrails, and I think that is missing from, again, you may think the conflict of interest is a cup of coffee. I may think a lobster dinner is not a conflict of interest because, I buy one for myself every week anyway. And and this kind of gives okay, so what if you're in that situation? What should you do? And this gives the answer.
So, well,
Or
I
it
think
did.
that's I
It
think
did
it's a very,
until Gail just removed it.
that's okay. Well, I think it's a very good point, Michelle, but you know what, I think this is gonna, I don't want to be naive about this, but I think that the document as a whole is helping to define some of these things. And we skipped some sections to get to these, 10 that we're looking at. So for example, and Gail, maybe if you could scroll up to gifts and favors, yeah, right there. So for example, like we skipped that one. We didn't talk about it tonight because I think everyone kind of agrees with that concept, and so it wasn't on the list. But that helps
Okay,
to,
yeah, that's fair. Okay, yeah,
yeah,
wasn't
and so
looking at that.
yeah, that's okay. But so the point is that I think throughout the document, some of these things are defined in other sections to give the outlook of, what we're trying to
Yeah.
accomplish. Okay.
So, hey,
Um,
Gail, just a kind of a request. When we're thinking of new language, maybe we could just make it before we're taking it, before we vote to add it or take it off, maybe we could just highlight it somehow in case it's
Okay.
something that we decide, you know what, we can't deal with this anymore tonight. We want a full committee to, decide, and let's just table it for a month or something. But yeah, Rob, I see what you're saying. Now that I see gifts and favors, I wasn't looking at it as a whole. I was only focused on the paragraph. So I'm good. I'm good then with the way it is.
yeah, and Gail, well, now, I'm just one vote, but I don't think we need any more language in there, Gail. And yeah, so
Okay.
wait a minute, before you take that off, let me just see what you've written there in case it's one of those odd moments where I could be mistaken, right?
I'm just
That's a
gonna
joke, Gail.
highlight it
Yeah,
as
I was thinking,
something
why
to
is that
look
off?
at. I just feel like we keep coming back to this every week, people saying that, to recuse themselves from a vote. I keep hearing that. So I feel like maybe if we just put it in there, it might be better.
Well, let's leave it until we go through the document, and if it's somewhere else, then we could take it out
Okay.
or put it where it goes better if we think we need something like that.
All right, yeah, fine, let's leave it, highlight it. But just as an example, that says shall recuse themselves from a vote that could constitute a conflict of interest. So that's, in my mind, that's kind of problematic. Listen, I think everyone in town is going to behave logically and responsibly, with this as they always do. However, I don't want, my political opponents in the 3 month, I kind of envision that there could be a timeline to some of these complaints, like 6 months before the town elections, as opposed to 3 months after the town election. You know what I mean? And so we don't want to invite that we don't want to, someone made a very good point. Well, the Ethics Commission will sort through all that stuff. And I'm sure, I have confidence they would, but we don't want to create a pipeline where they're just gonna get, a bunch of complaints that might, I'll go on a limb and say some of them might just be political as much as,
Mm.
ethics based, but anyway.
I see what you're saying.
And I'm wondering if it might help to Derek's point where that first sentence speaks to the concept of any, if we just strike or incur any obligation of any nature.
Where's that? Sorry,
No town officer shall have any interest, financial, otherwise direct or indirect, or engage in any business employment, transaction, or professional activity.
oh, incur, there's the incur, okay.
Yeah. So if we just a thought, if we just strike that, comma to comma,
I'm sure,
Well-
Michelle, I'm sorry, Michelle, explain again, please, what change you're suggesting we make?
No, that was
I-
not
I'm
me.
looking at the
That was
sentence.
Ellen.
Yeah,
'Cause I
go
don't
ahead.
understand it.
You explain it again, Ellen, go ahead.
so if we, to Derek's point, he speaks to the word any,
Oh,
which is a broad word. And if we strike the phrase after professional activity, comma, if we strike or incur any obligation of any nature, just remove it and continue with the sentence, which is a substantial conflict with proper discharge.
Well,
or
yeah,
professional
except-
activity, or incur any obligation of any nature. So it would read business, comma, employment, comma, transaction, comma, which is in substantial conflict. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah,
But hold on, there's another any. If you look at the first line, no town officer
Yeah.
shall have any,
Yeah.
which is fine with me, by the way.
or
but-
have a financial as opposed to any.
Yeah, I don't know if that really changes the meaning of it, though.
Yeah, I'm not seeing any change in the meaning with the any's or with that,
I think the
that phrase.
I think the saving grace here is the next line that talks about, well, I know we don't like it for some reason, but I think the thing that saves us is that one, the substantial conflict. Don't take that out.
No.
Guys, I think we need to be a little careful of taking this at face value. I mean, just taking the words for what they say, whether you take that middle part out. What this says is no town officer, we know what that means, anybody. Nobody who has a role in town government shall have any interest in any way, shape, or form, which is in what we're trying to say here is if you go from having no interest to having an interest because something happens to you or you undertake an action that brings that on, you then need to take steps to preclude you acting in a way that compromises the town's interests. Doesn't say that you can't have the conflict. Things will happen in the natural order of life. You could discover that you have a conflict that you didn't know that you had.
Mhm.
Oh, the words that are being developed here are being contemplated here are saying that you just can't have a conflict, and that's absurd. What natural life will bring about a conflict. What we want is for you to act as a good agent, as a responsible person when you see that conflict or it's brought to your attention, and take steps to separate yourself from that conflict.
Good point, and I'm balancing everything on substantial there, just about. Because it doesn't say in conflict, it says substantial conflict, and that goes back to the conversation we're having. There's some play in there, but that's play we want, I think.
Yeah, I mean, even the way they had written it, without limitation of the generality of the foregoing sentence, because it is quite general and all encompassing. And the sentence we have highlighted in green, I feel like that's basically what Derek was just saying is, like that we're kind of giving them like, if a conflict does come up, you should recuse yourself from voting, and avoid the appearance of impropriety, basically in an effort to not have a complaint brought against you. Right? Because somebody could file an ethics complaint if you're not, recusing yourself from a vote or disclosing that you've, been offered a gift or a lobster dinner or whatever it is, right?
Yeah, I don't think well, even if we were to leave in the concept of the green sentence, I don't like those words there though, because you shall recuse yourself. You have no option. You shall do it if there's something that could constitute a conflict of interest. That's
Okay.
just, that's just, that is every vote probably.
Mm,
Yeah, that is a very strict
Right.
and narrow opportunity. But again, if we think the concept should be in there, we have the opportunity to change the words. At this point, I
Okay.
can sort of go either way on it, but
Yeah, and I'll just.
not that anyone was asking my
Yeah,
opinion.
no, we are.
Well, I mean, I already
And-
gave it. It's not changing. I haven't.
Yeah, no one's asking mine, and I think I've said it 3 or 4 times already, but I'm gonna say it one more time. I think before we started looking at this section, I think it was pretty good.
Yeah, I know. We're kind of back to where we started with it.
I'm still stuck on the opening sentence that says you just can't have a conflict. You ought not to have a conflict, knowingly have a conflict and discharge the duties of your office. You ought not to
Well-
have a conflict and that puts the interests of the town at risk and engage in decision making, policy making, or actions that are impacted by that conflict. It's not that you can't have a conflict. You cannot, or even engage in an appearance of, have a conflict and not and you either need to avoid the conflict, ensure that you don't have a conflict, and then carry out the duties of your office, or in the event that you have a conflict, you need to not carry out the duties of your office. The problem is when the two dots are connected. You can have a conflict and the problem here is like the green sentence says, if I've got a conflict, I recuse myself. Okay, that's good. Common sense. I discover that I have a conflict, I disclose it, and I don't vote on the matter. The first sentence says, you just can't have a conflict. You see,
Well,
there's a
that's not what the first sentence says to me. I'm
That's
reading
right.
it differently. I'm reading the first sentence saying you can't have any interest that is going to be in substantial conflict with your ability to discharge your duties. So
I'm saying but that's what it says. You can't have a conflict. You're qualifying it, but it says you can't.
Substantial.
Yeah, a substantial conflict.
Okay, you can't
That-
have a
that-
substantial conflict.
Well, that makes it different though, Derek. It's not just any conflict. And listen, you might, if there's gotta be something like, I think we're all in agreement. We don't want to use numbers. We want to use words here.
Yeah, I was advocating
Yeah.
that point a while ago, but now I'm
Right.
looking at this and seeing a different problem, which is I appreciate that we've embraced the thinking that any is problematic and we want to instead use the word substantial. But I mean, let me read this out loud. No town officer shall have any interest, financial or otherwise, direct or indirect, or engage in any business, employment, transaction, or professional activity, or incur any obligation of any nature, which is in substantial conflict with the proper discharge of their public duties or employment. The problem is that there's a period there. There's a lot of qualification, but it still takes you back to you can't have a conflict. right? And then it goes
No,
on
he-
to say, however,
No.
if you do have one, here's what you can do to stay out of trouble.
No, it's not that you can't have a conflict, you can't have a substantial conflict, which in the way it's, and I agree with whoever's making the point, that differentiates the cup of coffee from the extra, when you're finished paving the town hall, come pave my driveway,
Mm.
you know,
Yeah,
kind of
okay.
thing.
All right. I can see what you're saying.
But
can
there
see what
could be,
you're saying.
listen, there could be a word other than substantial that people like better. Again, I think
No,
that.
I think you persuaded me that I didn't want it to say you just can't have a conflict and then just walk away from that point. But I think you're making the point to me that it's okay to do that so long as it's qualified as substantial. So I'm persuaded. I'll shut up.
Yeah, and Derek, it might help to read it for just no town officer shall have any interest which is in substantial conflict with the proper discharge of their public duties or employment, like kind of skipping all the
Yeah.
examples.
Well, I think also, that certain degree of ambiguity gives more authority to the ethics commission as far as what they'll see as a valid complaint.
Right.
We're not boxing them in and saying, well, if it's under $200, you can't bring a claim, We're just kind of letting them decide what substantial is so that, if they do get a complaint, they can kind of interpret it as they want to.
Yeah, and so I'm just gonna make a note. I'm not sure if I'm even ready to say this out loud yet, but as we're having this conversation, I don't know if any of the other codes we looked at had this concept, but like, should we towards the end, when we're finished with all the rest of this work, should we create a section where we try to discourage / prohibit / make it difficult for, one person to keep bringing these complaints, so to speak. Now maybe they're right every time, so we don't want to do that, because if you're right, you're right. But I mean, as we're having this conversation, maybe it's only in my mind, but I'm imagining abuse,
Hmm. So,
Yeah, and I can
Agreed.
tell you there's a lot of good people in town who are concerned that this becomes, the devil's workshop.
Yeah.
say more about that, Derek. I'm not sure I'm following.
If we're too, if we're not careful about the word any, and well, it's everything that we've been talking about, right? If we it's that concern that Rob just pointed to of routine complaints for the purposes of, not to put words in Rob's mouth, I'll put them in my own. This is supposed to keep good people from getting in trouble. But if it is not written tight enough, or on the other hand, loose enough to allow for the application of common sense, it runs afoul of people being afraid to do their work. And if they're afraid to do their work, one thing we should not have here is for the ethics code to be written so very tightly that eventually people don't want to serve in government, because volunteerism is the mother's milk of our government in this small town. We need people to be wanting to serve, willing to serve, and too tight of a code of ethics can discourage that.
Wow, that's an interesting perspective. I'll have to give that a think. But but Rob, I do, or I should say, I do like Rob's idea of putting a pin in something where maybe at the end we give somebody some common sense discretion. I don't know who that is, right? So that to the opposite of what Derek was just saying, there's not some like bad actor who's just, takes it on there as their job to just, like they saw Michelle with somebody at, Dunkin' Donuts and they paid for the coffee or whatever, like it gets to be this very um uh complaint machine, right? I think that's what you're talking about, right,
Right.
Derek? Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah. So
absolutely.
yeah, if it's not in here somewhere, I'm open to finding a way to um try to put some common sense around the latitude. This may not be the section to do it in, but
Yeah, I
No,
don't think
no,
so.
yeah, not here. No, that would come in a different, if we were to do such a thing, it would be its own section somewhere
yeah,
later.
that's a good place. Maybe we could put make a note somewhere to consider adding a section to put a little bit of structure around the latitude or something. I don't know.
Well, to Derek's point, when service becomes self-interest is the reason we're here. We want to make sure that we're serving and we're doing so that we prohibit self-interest.
Or self-interest that, yeah, that is going to impact the ability to perform, that is above the interest of the town or in conflict with the interest of the town. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, I'm sorry, I'm just gonna have, okay, all right, any other thoughts on this one tonight? Or we're ready to try and move to a different section? And listen, by the way, I think I'm intentionally not voting on, calling any votes on any of this stuff tonight. We're just having like a robust conversation, and then we'll, as we complete this, we'll come back and vote on these things or vote on, we'll decide how we want to do it. We'll vote section by section. Do we want to vote on the whole thing? We'll figure that out. So is there anyone who hasn't been heard on some section of this that wants to say something else?
No. Gail, can you clarify that we may also add a section? We may want to add a section on, and I don't know if Rob, you want it here or you just want it in the minutes, but we may also want to add a section to put some, I don't know how to best say it, structure around the latitude or, guideline, something. Just so that we remember we have to come back and speak to it. I don't know if it makes sense to go in here or in the minutes, but.
Wait, you mean for this concept of a person who might file too many complaints or something else?
Right. Like there's some kind of, I'm not gonna, veto power, for lack of a better term, right? There's some kind of common sense guardrail. What we were just talking about, maybe adding it to a different section or something. But just a note somewhere so that we remember we're gonna come back to it someday.
Yeah. Yes, okay.
Guys, I'm gonna have to drop in a few minutes. I gotta take my stepfather to the doctor.
Okay, well, thank you for joining us and giving us this time, Derek.
Thank you.
Yes.
I'll do everything I
Thank
can to
you.
be on the next call and show up prepared, having read the material. I've been traveling a lot lately. Just traveling a lot. I feel like I'm rarely home. Thank you
It's
for
the
your,
first,
thank you.
yeah, the first Monday of June, whatever that is.
Yes, sir. I think I may be back here in Hawaii then. I'll talk to you later.
All
Bye-bye.
right. Yeah, I'm sorry, Michelle and the other members, I was trying to kind of look ahead because I don't know if I looked at this before coming here tonight, but there's a full section that we're gonna get to on, how the commission will conduct itself in terms of receiving complaints and
Right,
having
right.
hearing, yeah, all that stuff. But this is a little different than that. This is something else. And this is another one of those things. If we dip our toes into, this about this person I'm imagining who would, bring too many complaints, because like I said, they could be right. What if they're right every time? Or what if they're wrong 7 times, but the 8th time they're right? I'm sorry, what
Yeah.
if they're wrong 7 times? So there's a lot of tension there, if you're gonna do something about that, about how to do it in the proper way. And, I don't, maybe it can't be done. I don't know, but we'll think
Yeah,
about it.
yep, I agree. So
Um,
Gail, I'm gonna ask it if you wouldn't mind if you could go back and highlight that statement, because it'll signal to us that we added it tonight instead of that we simply removed it. We sort of did both, but at least we have like a little bit of a sort of our little homegrown record of what we did with that, which was we put it in and then we sort of said, we're probably gonna take it out.
Okay.
And if, I mean, folks aren't comfortable with that, please shout it out. I know I just kind of,
no, that's
No,
good.
yeah, I'm comfortable with that, with the reality that if there is a conflict that is identified, that the board, the town official would recuse themselves. I think it's the right thing to do. But, the highlight in red, that should be held for section 13, I think.
oh, okay. I wasn't sure where it went. I just wanted to make a
Yeah.
note somewhere that we
Yeah.
knew we had to talk about it.
Okay, so then the next section that I had put on our list, or that I should say I think we all agreed to do these, but you can blame me if you don't like them. Section 10, political activity. So we're skipping over use of town assets, which I think we all
Mhm.
agreed on, and outside employment, which I think we all agreed upon. And then the sections on political activity and public comment, public conduct weren't populated.
Right.
So, I don't think I'm in a position to start leading that conversation right now. Does anybody have, a review they did that they want to make I see Ellen's looking at some notes. Maybe she wants to lead us, or anyone else? No?
Well, my only thought is that based on watching some of the meetings online, that I'm curious to know if in fact we should add a sergeant of arms for, um, these two sections. So that if there is, undecoratorious behavior, the sergeant of arms has the latitude to, make sure that the room is, maintained decoratoriously. And that would be under public conduct. And I'm not even so sure it should be in a code of ethics. That should perhaps be in the, charter.
Well, Robert asked me not to make any changes so that we're
yeah.
all looking at the same working
Mhm.
copy this week. But I would like to go look at some other towns and how they've populated this. Again, I don't want to get in, I don't want to box ourselves in and say that, there must be a sergeant of arms present for every, discussion or something. I
And
want
again,
to give the Ethics Commission enough latitude to to make common sense decisions for themselves.
Point well taken. Again, that, when I'm speaking of in terms of the sergeant of arms, I'm thinking that when I looked at this and I looked at the charter, I was thinking that it really should go into the charter. But there's got to be some kind of, in my thinking, I would really like to see how other towns wrangle with this.
Okay,
And perhaps they defer to their own charter. But we can't because it's not in there.
Yeah, I think a couple things I'm thinking about that. One is that, yeah, it's probably beyond our scope. I would say that, before I forget, here's the point I want to make. So I see, Gail, you're typing something in there. Yeah, I didn't want to be misunderstood about, because you've done a great service for us. Again, I'll keep saying it. You've done a great service for us by providing us with with this code. I don't want to be heard as saying, don't make any changes, between meetings, but maybe do what you're doing now, just put them in,
yeah, just
a
highlight
different
it.
color or a different font, so that we
Right.
can see what that is. So I'm sorry about, saying it a
No,
different way.
I didn't want to go change a bunch of stuff in case. Yeah, but I think
Yeah.
doing it in different color actually makes sense, right?
Yeah, yes, works very well.
Yeah,
Now,
so
the
that
thing-
we know that you've added it or whatever, and we can talk about it. I think that makes
Mhm.
perfect sense. I'm
The
trying
one
to
thing
see
I-
if I see anything on these.
The other thing,
Okay.
comment I'll make about the sergeant at arms is that, and now I was on the Board of Finance and now I'm not. You quickly are sort of out of the loop, so to speak, when you're not on one of these boards or committees. But, I went to the town meeting where the budget was presented the other night. And I'm not prepared to say how many people think this way, or how many people think that way, but there is at least some split of opinion amongst the townspeople on whether they think it would be a good idea to hire a second state trooper or not. Or, to pay for a second state trooper or not. Now, that's not the sergeant at arms, but it kind of is, because somebody's gonna have to pay for a sergeant at arms probably, because
Right.
so I do think that is probably something that would go to whatever, the charter or the Board of Selectmen or something. Because that's gonna be a budgeted item, I'm sure. I think, and by the way, I think there might have been a question, what do other towns do? And there may be, maybe some of our cities and larger towns, when they have their town council meeting or whatever, they may have police there all the time. Or the Board of Education at some place might always have a police officer there. That does not happen most places unless there's reason to think that there's a really, sort of, not only hotly contested issue that's being discussed, but there's reason to believe that people might hotly contest it in ways other than with their words, I think, and I may not be remembering this the right way, but I think there, on occasion, even in our area, there may be some Board of Ed meetings that, where you just sort of had the trooper hanging around, just
Yeah.
in case. But yeah.
Okay. We definitely want to look at what other towns do. Because
Yeah,
like
I'm
you
not
said,
seeing
there could be
anything.
some pretty I'm thinking like when they have hearings, and then an accuser is there with the accused, it could get,
Yeah, that
Physical.
could be dicey, yeah.
yeah.
So I come from a smaller town where we had a sergeant of arms, but they weren't paid.
Is it a volunteer type thing?
Yeah. But our town was 749 people.
I can't say I'm terribly familiar with this term. It sounds like you're saying sergeant of arms and Robert is saying sergeant at arms. Is it of or at?
For what I recall,
Sergeant at arms. Okay.
yeah. and that person's job is to keep the peace.
Mhm.
So when things get hot and bothered, he's just there to be the voice of not necessarily reason, but decorum.
Right.
And I guess whatever we would do with public conduct, I mean, I'm imagining this is gonna be, non-board members who come and disrupt, so to speak, but, I don't know if, I mean, is our code gonna reach those people?
No, but the code would have the latitude to refuse those people consistent voice in a derogatory tone.
You know, when I was on the Board of Finance, there was a case out of Massachusetts State Court. Went to the Massachusetts Supreme Judicial Court, and I don't remember the name of the case. I could look it up if people are interested. And there was a really disruptive person who kept coming to all the town Board of Selectmen meetings or whatever it was, the Board of Education or the Selectmen or whatever it was, and just, being disruptive, not being disruptive in the way that they were turning over chairs and things, but, they were being critical of, stuff in what was called a disruptive way. Well, it went all the way, the case went, I think they banned the person from coming to meetings, right? Okay. So then somehow the case winds its way up to this Supreme Court of Massachusetts. And the Supreme Court of Massachusetts basically said, you can't do that. And then they went back to our rabble-rousing founders, et cetera, et cetera. It's the American way and all that stuff. So they looked at it from that point of view, rather than we gotta run an efficient meeting and et cetera, et cetera. So it depends on how you look at it, but that decision is not from, 100 years ago. That was like from, 2019 or something. So, which is not to say we couldn't address this concept, but there are, we Americans have the right to go and express the Norman Rockwell painting. The guy has the ability to go and have his say, or her say.
Yeah, but Sam Adams was given a lot of beer to keep him at bay, so. But
I would be more concerned about, physical retaliation. Somebody, becoming dangerous if they're accused and maybe their job is on the line and there's a hearing in a small room in the back of the town hall with just a few people present. You might want to have a state trooper there or a sergeant at arms there who's concealed carry or something, I mean, I don't know. It's one of those things where I feel like we should give that future ethics commission the latitude to decide for themselves if they would like to have some type of security present.
Well, so I can see on the screen, and I'm not trying to change the subject, okay? Don't get me wrong, but I see right below that is the harassment and discrimination section, which
Yeah.
I'm probably gonna, my point of view is probably gonna lose the vote when we get to it. But I say that's another redundant section.
Okay.
The reason but the reason I mention that is I think, with this conversation we're having now, I think that the conversation we're having might be a redundant conversation. No, I don't want to go to that section. I'm sorry. I was just using it as an example, but let's stay where we are. I don't want to take us off this. But for instance, it's always been the case that if someone is physically disruptive or threatening or violent or seemingly violent, we always call the cops. They could always be arrested. The court's always going to tell them to, cease and desist and stay away from the meeting if you can't behave yourself, sort of all that stuff from a criminal perspective, not from a freedom of speech perspective or anything like that.
Right.
But I would like to see how, if we can do some research
Okay.
on how other towns handle that. Because, there, I would want the selectmen to have some latitude, as you had stated, that they know that if there's an issue at hand that can be volatile, they
Mhm.
can solicit the help of the state trooper to attend the meeting.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Because there are a lot of people who have concealed carry. Good guys, bad guys. And at least if we know that the select board has the wherewithal to keep the meeting in a reasonable tone.
Yeah.
And managed because there's someone of authority that can help them.
So we'll poke around on that and see if there's any, I don't mean that the way it sounds, but we'll investigate and see if there's any language that we can put in there. However, I'll say again, I don't think I agree with the concept. It's a great idea. I just don't think it comes from this perch, so to speak.
And then, that's
but-
my,
yeah.
exactly, there's nothing in the charter. And there's nothing really, and there's nothing here. And should there be something somewhere?
Well, but not to beat a dead horse, but there is, the criminal statutes prohibit threatening, breach of peace, public disturbances, attempted assaults, all the things we're concerned about. But
They don't have that, and they don't have that at their fingertips. You as an attorney know where those statutes are, but a code of ethics and the charter doesn't speak to that.
right, but no, what I'm saying is a person doesn't need to know all that to know that you gotta call the cops.
Exactly.
Right, so we all know you gotta call the cops sometimes.
Right.
And we know what the number is, so, that's all I'm saying.
Okay.
But I guess, so Gail, Gail, you've sort of taken this on for yourself to give us these working copies.
Mhm.
And, are you able to investigate some language here as well?
Yeah,
Okay.
sure, I can do that. I'll add it like highlighted green or something.
Yeah,
So that we
good.
can revisit it next time, look at the language.
Michelle, did you
I-
have any comment on any of that?
I was just starting to type something in the chat because I found in the town of Old Lyme, I was just kind of looking as we were chatting. In the town of Old Lyme, under political activity, they have a sentence that says, it's one sentence, no public employee or public official or candidate for elected office of the town shall utilize town funds, supplies, vehicles, or facilities for the purpose of any political activity. That's it.
That sounds good.
And again, it's only one town, right? But actually, if you saw this, they go way into detail on conflict of interest and this and that
Yeah.
and other. But
Mhm.
so you would be disappointed to step. Is that something you want me to pop in the chat? I have to type it out. Or Gail, what's the best way to get that to you? Take
You
a
could
picture?
just email it to me, or whatever you want to do.
Okay. I'm gonna take a little picture and I'll email
Okay.
it to you.
Now,
Um,
I'm gonna talk while you're doing that, Michelle, if that's okay.
Yeah,
So,
yeah, that's fine. Go ahead, go right
Now,
ahead.
what Michelle just read is sort of what I thought when I read section 10, political activity, like the sort of thing that might be in there. But, I guess Gail or Ellen, did either of you have any other thoughts in mind on what that might mean? Or what you might want to see in there?
No, I like what Michelle pulled out of Old Lyme. I'm wondering if there's another town that we can look at, or a couple of towns that you look at to validate that statement, so we know that it's a consistent statement within other towns.
Yeah, I mean, I can
Mhm.
do that. I can even do that probably while we're chatting. I did put it in the chat, Gail, if you just want to cut and paste it, but I will also send it to you.
In the chat.
Mm-hmm.
Oh,
If you
I
go to
see
the
it up
top,
here. Okay, yeah, okay.
We don't have that luxury
Sure.
here.
no,
I can just copy and paste
no,
that
you
then.
probably don't, sorry. And, sorry, Gail, can you remind me of your email?
Well, you don't need to email it to me.
Okay,
I just copied it from the chat.
okay. Perfect. All right, I'll see if I see any others.
And we can just say town officer, right? Or do you want to leave it as their wording?
I mean, that's what it says. I don't know
Well,
that
we
I
kind
have
of
one.
have our own definition of town
Yeah, yeah.
officer.
So,
Well,
Or
Our town,
candidate,
op-
right?
our town officer means just about everybody, so that'd be good. I think the way we define town officer, it's very expansive.
so what were the two sections? It was political activity and what was the other one?
The conduct. And that
The
would be where the sergeant of arms would come in.
Okay. So I'm sorry, it was political activity and conduct?
Public.
Public conduct.
Public conduct, thank you.
Yep.
Okay.
It's on the, I'm not, these may be, we may have renumbered, Gail may have renumbered some of these as we go along tonight, but on the paper copy, I'm old enough, I hold papers, so it's section 11 was public conduct.
Okay. All right, yeah, I mean, if anyone wants me to check any specific locations, let me know. Otherwise, I'll just, pick a few, North Branford, Old Saybrook, maybe Madison, Branford, something, like just whatever seems like it might be reasonable.
Okay, very good,
Just
thank you.
give a sample of a little bit.
Now, what about, like, I know when they selected us, there's 2 Democrats, 2 Republicans, and 2 unaffiliated. Do we want to, like, when I think like political, I think politics. Like, do we want to say that, there should be some type of differing political affiliations within the boards, or no?
Well, that's covered, yeah, it's covered, Ellen's saying what's in the charter, but it's also covered by state
Oh.
statute.
Okay.
And so yeah, minority representation is guaranteed. I want to say if, like on a 6-member board, this board happens to be 2 to 2 to 2.
Oh, it just happens to be. I thought they did that on purpose. Okay.
Oh, no, what I mean is the state statute would not require this board to be 2 to 2 to 2.
Okay.
The state statute, I might have it wrong because I haven't looked at it in a while. I don't believe the state statute guarantees any unaffiliated spots, which is
Right.
probably a bad idea. But in a, whatever you want to call a full Republican town, Democrats are guaranteed, certain number of spots on a certain committee. Yeah, Ellen has it here. So for a 6-member, I'm sorry, it goes the other way around. So from a 6-member board, you could have no more than 4 members of one political party.
Okay.
And so what that does is it guarantees, a minority spot. It's
Right. And we don't need to put it in since it's
no,
already
it's
there.
already, because, well, if we put it in, we can say nothing except what's already been said.
Yeah. Okay.
So yeah, we can skip that one. If people feel like pressing on at 8:30? If we do one more, that would be 5 out of our 10 sections. However, the 5th one is the harassment and discrimination section.
That's easy, you're done.
Oh.
We've got it, yeah, you're done. We know it has to be there.
Well, and that may very well be, and quite honestly, we have talked about that one a lot, and I think our positions are kind of staked out on that, and I think we all agree that harassment and discrimination is wrong. We just disagree on,
On the wording.
well, not even on the wording, just, it's like I don't want to compare it to what we just talked about, but from my point of view, I would say we don't have to define which members of which political party can be on the ethics commission because state statute already defines it. That's what I'm saying, and I don't expect you guys to agree with me, it's fine, but that's what I'm saying about the harassment and discrimination section, is sort of already covered. But,
Like we
Um,
discussed last time, this is more overreaching. This is not necessarily like, we're not talking about like, serious like sexual assault or like, full on harassment. I'm thinking more of like, a work environment that's uncomfortable or, I feel like, especially as a woman, it should be in there. It
I agree.
gives them a little bit of, because it's not in the town charter and, not everything is like, I'm going to call 911 over this, but, I mean, like for example, I had a principal in a school I was working at who would massage me. Didn't want to be massaged, didn't like it, but he was doing it and I didn't know what to do or he was the principal. So like, who could I complain to? And he wasn't doing anything illegal, but it was extremely uncomfortable. And I'm just thinking it would be nice to have like the ethics committee as somebody who could, listen to a complaint, maybe speak to that other person, sanction them in some way. I just feel like I like having it in there because it's not in the town charter or anywhere else, and not everything is going to be pursued, criminally. That's
I
just
think-
my feeling on it.
And I agree with you. I understand exactly what you're speaking of, but I think to keep this clear and easily defined, if we have harassment and discrimination, we reference that the within the code of ethics, there the employee handbook and state statutes and constitution would be the procedural, would be the process and procedure. And you can just make it that simple, say, as referencing the employee handbook for harassment and discrimination. And it's
So
right,
have them look at state statutes. I'm sorry.
yeah,
would-
actually, we could pull that,
poster, yeah.
There's a poster right in the employee room here. And basically, all we really need to highlight for this section would be with regard to harassment and discrimination, the employee handbook, as well as state statutes and constitution would be engaged. It's right
Do
there.
they have an employee handbook?
They do.
Okay. I'd like to see what's in there already.
You want me to pull that? I'm gonna pull I guess you could see it if I pull the poster and then I'll rehang it.
Okay.
I mean, it's a substantial poster. It speaks to what, if you have a concern, you can, you know what, maybe I can take a picture of it.
So, yeah.
Is it a town employee handbook, Ellen? Like is it on the site maybe?
I don't know if it's on this, I'm sure they have one on the site. They would have to. I had to when I had my school. I'm gonna take a picture of this and send it to you.
So I think hopefully Ellen can hear me talking as she's
I
doing
can.
it. Yeah, she says she can. So, I'm not saying this now to attempt to persuade you guys, because that, you guys have your point of view and that's perfectly fine. That's why, there are multiple members of the committee. But what I'm trying to say, just so I'm clear, it's not that these things, I mean, some of these things could be criminal, but everything that's listed on the, in the section here, everything from, you know, suggestive or lewd remarks to unwanted hugs and everything that's just described there. That's all, those are already actionable items with the Commission on Human Rights and Opportunities, and they have the ability to, I mean, this is a state agency that oversees this sort of thing, so there's nothing, I don't want it to be heard that I'm saying that that agency reserves itself for whatever more serious things would be. I think the things that we've listed here are quite serious, and they take that into account. They have these cases all the time. That's all I'm saying.
So it's here. It's posted. And it's under the Commission of Human Rights and Opportunities. I'll send this to you all. Just this section, and it's a poster that speaks to a number of issues, but it speaks to specifically sexual harassment is illegal and notice of employees. In terms of an employee handbook, when I had my school, we had to have it. We had to have it on site. So I'm going to put this back.
I don't want to take us back too far, but I looked at, and I'll document it. I didn't see anything for political activity or personal behavior in Guilford, Haddam, or Madison, or probably North Branford. But in Orange, I found something for political activity. Well, actually, North Branford said something about, people shouldn't be electors. They shouldn't have held political office at the time they're on the commission, or within. Orange was 1 year, North Branford was 2 years ahead of time. And you can't be like a candidate, hold office while you're on the committee, which I think I already said. So
You can't hold office while you're on the committee?
while you're on the ethics committee. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Oh, yeah.
So,
Okay.
and not a whole lot of stuff, but I mean, I'll send it to you anyway, Gail. If I have a minute, I'll type it in here, but that's what I checked.
Okay.
I haven't seen anything about sergeant at arms or any behavior like that, so
I mean, the political
I can keep
office, like,
looking around, but
isn't the Board of Selectmen, like, isn't the select person the, I don't know. They're an elected official, right?
Yes, they are.
And they were serving on the Board of Selectmen, I guess for other committees, right?
yeah, I'm not saying that we do that. Like I said,
Right.
Madison, Haddam, Guilford, nothing, right?
Yeah, I'll
Um,
look at some other towns and see if there's anything.
I might have missed the first part of that conversation, but if you're talking, and so I'm sorry if I'm misunderstanding this, so tell me I got it wrong and I wasn't listening closely enough. But if you're talking about trying to define who should be able to be on the sort of next ethics commission,
mhm.
was that, okay, so I do agree. I mean, if we don't make it that, so we could make it that it's a 100% folks who are not otherwise a town officer as we're defining it. That'd be
Right.
fine. That'd be great. But even if we don't do that, we should temper it in some way. At least this many members of the commission shall not be a town officer. And there are, I don't know that language right now, but I know that there is language in the town charter on that. I know when it came up a few years ago on, being on the Board of Selectmen and the Board of Education at the same time. So there's some language that can be worked off of. But that seems like a great idea to me, because you don't want, no offense to anyone, but you don't want the ethics committee being, totally populated by the folks who were already sort of
In charge.
in charge, right?
Right, and like, what town am I on? Glastonbury says the commission, no more than two members, two of the regular members, because they have 7 members, 5 and then 2 alternates. No more than 2 of the regular members may be affiliated with any one political party, and the alternate members may not both be affiliated with the same political party.
Now, that language is also found in the charter, so that is consistent.
Okay, so then we don't need it here.
No, we don't
Right,
need
or-
that part, yeah.
Okay,
That's, yeah, we covered that.
so then I'm not gonna
Oh,
worry
and
about.
actually, I think the language I'm thinking of on, if we want to have it be some sort of hybrid of elected officials and non-elected officials, I think I was mistaken. Well, maybe I was not mistaken, but it's certainly in the, who can be on the charter. Because I was on the Charter Revision Commission number 1, and there was some limitation on that, how many people could hold an elected position, and I think we had run afoul of it in some manner, unknowingly or whatever. And so we were disbanded.
Oh, okay.
Michelle, do you have an email that you can give me?
Oh, yeah.
You have it? Never mind.
Whoops. Okay, so, Michelle, did you, I think the harassment and discrimination conversation tonight was mostly Gail, Ellen, and me, which, I'm losing 2-1, but, did you have anything I think, I don't, yeah, I think you're mostly with Ellen and Gail, but
No, I
I
think
can't
I
remember.
was initially, and
Oh.
then we said we had it somewhere else. Honestly, Rob, what I was hoping was that you'd pick an easy slam dunk, like
Yeah,
a slam
yeah.
dunk, so that we could get get halfway done. But if it's, I'll have to go back and look at the notes, but I thought said it was somewhere else. I think you guys convinced me that it was elsewhere, so I didn't feel we needed that in here anymore.
Well, you know what, it's not, this is a big issue, and we've discussed it a lot, and everybody has good viewpoints on it. And I think we probably do need more discussion on it, and it is not fair to, try and shoehorn it in the last few minutes, or whatever, however much more time we have with each other tonight. So let me see, what did we have, well,
Remember, yeah, I think mine was just maybe just refer to the guidelines, right? Refer to the state guidelines
Right.
or whatever it was. Yeah, if we were going to say anything about it.
yeah, but again, this is a big topic, so I don't wanna.
Yep, it is.
Yeah, so let's sort of table it, I guess. And
Okay.
if we want to get to the magic number 5, and listen, I don't know, maybe this is challenging too. Actually, you know what? I got an idea. We'll go to, here, I got a good one.
There's an easy one.
Yeah, there's an easy one. We'll go to section 16, which is, well, nothing's easy, so maybe this one isn't either. So I'm skipping a couple. And section 16 is entitled Board of Ethics, Membership, Term, and Vacancy. So.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so, and we sort of talked about that to some degree now, because we're sort of, it's already defined as to, sort of the maximum number of, Democrats or Republicans or whatever, whatever party can
Yeah.
be there. So that's already done. I think what we would maybe really focus on then would be the number of members and the length of their terms. And I'll just say, when I was on the Board of Finance, it was a 6-member board with 4-year terms, and they were staggered. And I thought, man, that doesn't make any sense at all. Especially because the selectmen were elected every 2 years. And don't you want an odd number instead of an even number? But then as time went on, I thought, hey, this kind of makes some sense. So, in terms of number, basically, 6 and 7 are the same. You need 4. And we're a small town. Look, we're not going to create a 11-member board or 9-member board. Probably not even a 7-member board. The Board of Selectmen, are 3, and I know Charter Revision kicked that around. Is that too small? Do you need 5, for instance? And they ended up leaving it. It seems to me, as we consider this, we're 5 or 6 would probably be the right answer.
I'm looking at the Board of Assessment for Appeals. And that's a 3
Three,
member,
that's
that's
3.
3 members
Yeah.
serving for 4 years. And I'm of the opinion that the amount of time served should be staggered.
Oh, absolutely.
So
Yeah.
it just makes it so much.
For continuity.
easier. Exactly, transition and continuity. So if the Fire Commission, also 3 members, 2 elected.
What is our board, that we never meet, the Fair Rent? How many are on there?
3.
No, it's more than 3.
It was 4, but one of the fellows resigned.
I know, but how many are we supposed to be?
I think we were able to have 4. It was you, Curtel,
Yeah,
myself, and the fellow who bought.
no, we were 5. I think we were 5. Here we are. We're 5.
Who's the 5th?
Catello, Remmer, Bombalicki, Oppenheimer, Byrne. Now, I don't know who's really populating these seats right now, but
Never saw Byrne.
no, Byrne came.
Oh, I don't remember
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
Okay.
He always sat right next to you.
Oh, okay.
Nice guy.
Okay.
Sorry,
Oh, yes.
everybody.
Oh, yes, you're right. I'm sorry. But
Bombalicki is off.
Bombalicki came off because he recused himself as he was a landlord.
Okay. All right.
So we had 4, and we never replaced them.
Well, I'm sorry to put Michelle and Gail to put you guys through this, but the Fair Rent Commission hasn't really had any cases. However, it is a board that would be similar in some manner to the Ethics Commission because it would hear complaints and it would render rulings and its rulings would be subject to appeal in court, and all that stuff. So, and that's a 5-member board, so I'm thinking somewhere around 5 is probably the right number here.
I do too. If you have 5 people, then you know that you're not gonna have necessarily a tie, and you can have some resolution. Unless somebody recuses themselves.
And actually, you know what? I'm thinking about this the wrong way a little bit because I'm thinking, oh, these people are going to be elected, but they're not
They're
going to be
appointed.
elected. They're going to be appointed.
Right,
And I don't know how long our terms are. Do you know how long?
yes, I do. And we had a term of 3 years.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, listen, I'm gonna, from my perspective on this question, I'm gonna borrow heavily from how the Fair Rent Commission was put together from my point of view. That doesn't mean it's right or wrong, but that's sort of recently been done, and I think, it's mostly okay. So I'm not gonna be very creative on that one now, but I'm happy, you guys get to obviously put in your own thoughts there, except I guess the only caveat is it's gonna be appointed rather than elected in terms of when you're thinking about how many members you think should be on there and what the term should be.
Yep. And then the other thing is, and by the way, Gail, I popped in what I found out for Orange and North Branford and Glastonbury. and Orange and North Branford is more into the chat, and Orange and North Branford is more about political, like who could have held political office or not. Glastonbury is more about the composition of the Ethics Commission. But so just know that that information is there. And then Rob, to your comment, I mean, I don't know that I have a strong opinion. I think we should consider, in addition to number, which I think I've heard 3, I've heard 5, so I'm not sure where we
Yeah.
landed. But do we need alternates? And then, what? And if so, how many? And then do we have any political party restrictions, like no more than X number from a certain political party?
Yeah, again, those have already been sort of decided. We don't have to trouble ourselves with that, so to speak.
Oh,
Like,
okay.
The Board of Selectmen will take that into account as they're appointing people.
Okay, so
and-
what
and
is the
look-
fair rent commission? Like, what is that composition?
It's 5 with staggered 4-year terms, right?
Yeah, but
Yeah, I think, well,
we're all done.
I'm not sure where we are now because we were all appointed at the same time and I don't,
Exactly.
and maybe someone got a shorter term, I'm not, but we haven't,
Okay,
we haven't had any cases, but it would be that. I guess
Okay.
when they're created, if we chose 5, for instance, I guess 2 people would get a 2-year term to start with. 3 people would get a 4-year term, then it'd be 4, going forward.
right.
Or whatever the math is on that. I can't do the
Yep,
math,
yep.
but you know what I'm trying to say.
Yep, and then are there any alternates?
There are,
No.
there are no alternates. Now, it's a funny thing I see in lots of towns. That, and it's even with elected boards and commissions, alternates are often elected. I think we might have alternates elected here for our planning and zoning and ZBA. I wouldn't swear to that, but I think we do. And I think that's about the only place. So for instance, the Board of Finance never had alternates. I think in some of our sibling towns, they do elect alternates. I would err on the side of going the Killingworth way, so to speak, that we probably wouldn't want alternates.
Okay, and then, I mean, I'm just taking notes, I know others may have other comments. And then what about, did you say that the town already has a mechanism for political party
Yes,
balancing? Okay,
yes, and the charter and state statute set it forth. So if it's
Okay.
5, it's gonna be 3, I'm pretty sure. So, no, is it 4 or 5?
Maximum number 5,
No, for
Oh,
4, if we have total members, 4.
4, 3,
Nope, if we have 5.
It'd be
it's
2.
4.
it's 4. If you have 5 members, it's 4. But,
I think
If you have
that may
5
be some-
members, it's up to 4 members can be in one party?
That's right.
right,
I think that might be part of the rhyme or reason to maybe the 6, because it's still 4 with 6. Now, I think, listen, that fair is fair. I think you see with this board, for instance, there could have been 4 members of one political party, but that's not what happened. It's 2, 2, and 2, right?
and I think it was the
Right.
select board that made that decision.
It was.
Which, is fair enough.
But listen, that's how this Board of Selectmen, proceeded. A different Board of Selectmen in the past may have proceeded in a different way. One in the future may proceed in a different way, but they are limited by this. So theoretically, there could have been 4 Republicans or 4 Democrats on this board, and that would have been perfectly permissible. And,
Would be
Okay,
ethical.
I mean,
yeah, but- yeah.
I think I would not go more than 3 on a board of 5, and since we have so many independents, I might even go down to 2. But I also think that this is the type of thing where we may not need to spend a lot of time on a recommendation, because by the time there's public input and the Board of Selectmen look at it and the first select person looks at it, it's gonna like work itself out. I don't know that
Yeah,
our wisdom is,
Yeah.
is specialized, right, for this piece of it.
yeah, but this is our job. They want us to figure this out. Then they'll take their pot shots at us, but
Okay.
I don't know.
Right.
I think as we kind of chat about this and think about it, and we haven't, I mean, this may be the first time we're really thinking about this because we've been talking about this other stuff, and I'm starting to think 5.
I like 5.
5, and I would go 2 and 2, 2 and 1.
No, well, no, we can't do that.
Why?
Well, we could, but it's one of those things. Well, listen, here, I could be outvoted, okay? You guys can outvote me if you like, but this, I'm trying to be consistent here. Town charter, state statute already put a procedure in for political affiliation, which, by the way, I don't really agree with. If they ask me, I would say probably get rid of it altogether. If some town wants to elect all Republicans, have at it. They want to elect all Democrats, have at it. But this is our system, and so the good news for us is we don't have to dirty our hands with that. It's already been decided.
So we could generically just say 5 members and let the select board wrangle with how they define or appoint those members.
I feel like because it's ethics, we maybe want to give some deeper thought to that.
Yeah, maybe, well, I guess, listen, I guess if I let my mind wander on that. So the one thing you can't, and no one's advocating for this, so don't get me wrong, but the one thing you can't do is we couldn't make a rule that if we're selecting a 5-person board, well, this is a bad example because with 5, you can't have more than 4 of one party. And this is not the conversation we're having, I get it, but the limitation would be we couldn't say, we couldn't make a rule here that you could have all the members be of one political party. Like that's not within our power.
Right.
Okay, but you're not saying that. You're saying that you want to do something within that you want there to be a certain number of spots reserved for unaffiliated voters and maybe just unaffiliated, I don't know, or a certain number reserved for Democrats or Republicans. But you know what, I don't, yeah, I would, personally, I'm going to stay away from that because I think if the Ethics Commission says you have to have at least 2 members of the Killingworth Conservative Party on the Ethics Commission, I don't know that the Board of Selectmen are really, I'm not convinced they're restrained by that because state statute says they can put anybody they want on there so long as it's not more than 4 of one political party. You know what I mean? Like, I don't think we have that power.
Okay, I mean, if we don't have the power, we don't have the power. If we have the power, if I were granted the power,
Yep.
I would say on a board of 5, no more
Mhm.
than 3 from the same political party. But if I don't have that power, then I'm okay with the number 5.
Well, you know what I think you would, I'm gonna take your point of view, even though I'm probably against it. And I would say really what you want to do there is, I don't think you want to say it that way. I think, and I'm not saying this because I think you and Gail are unaffiliated, right? And this has nothing to do with you two, okay? But I think that what you really want to say is we want to reserve 1 spot or 2 spots or whatever it's going to be for unaffiliated voters. Because if you say no more than 3 from a political party, then no offense to the Democrats and the Republicans, but they're going to eat up all those spots probably. Right?
Yeah, but I'm okay with that, I think. I'm not looking for a spot for unaffiliated people. That's not what I'm looking for. What I'm saying, what I'm trying to avoid is 80% of, because again, I feel like because it's ethics, it needs to be somewhat balanced. And maybe that's,
I get
maybe
that.
maybe that's not the, so all I'm trying to do is say, you have no more than 60% from one party. And so to your point, it may continually flip, like Republican 60, Democrat 40, and then
Yeah.
Democrat 60, Republican 40. And also my observation of the way the town has worked since I've lived here, it always seems that appointees are balanced, like the folks doing the appointing look for some balance. So I'm not really concerned about it, like as we operate today. What I'm concerned about is just putting in a guardrail should, because 80% of an unpopular but happen to win this time party, people get appointed for 4 years, and then in that term you're appointing like a lot of people. It just feels a little, that
No,
feels a
I
lot.
get it. I get it. I get that 100%. But I guess I'm trying to, if I were arguing on your side, now, I'm not saying what you would say, I'm saying what I would say. And that
Yep.
would be that I would want to I'm not sure what the numbers are right now, but between Democrats, Republicans, unaffiliated may be the biggest group in town. I know they're right there if they're not the biggest group. And they're not really, when you look at these state statutes and things like that, they don't talk about unaffiliated, they talk about the parties, like you can't
Yeah.
have more. And so if there's, I already said it, so I shouldn't repeat myself, but I've already started. So I would look, if I were to be involved in voting in favor of this, I would be more persuaded to vote to say, if we've got a 5-member board, at least one or at least two or whatever it is you want to say must be unaffiliated. Because the Democrats and Republicans, they got all the protection you want, no problem. From state, and I don't mean from whoever's elected, I mean from statutes and things like that. So it's the unaffiliated who are probably being underrepresented in all of our boards and commissions. This board's probably notable because it's 2 to 2 to 2. I don't know, there's probably not too many boards like that,
Yeah, if that's, if as an independent voter, that's a big concern, just register for a party. Right? I don't know. I appreciate you making that argument. My thing is the 80-20 has the potential to be unbalanced. I'm less concerned about like 2, 2, and 1 or whatever. And
All right.
because the composition of the town could change. So you put this in
Oh, yeah.
and, and, but anyway.
Well, that's why I'm not on your side on this, because but you're right, and the composition of the town has changed over the pandemic. A lot of people moved out, a lot of people moved in, and I'm still not really sure who's who.
Yeah.
But I'm sorry, I'm not sure what political impact it's had, and maybe
Right.
none. Maybe it's all the same. I don't know, but that's why I say, you know what, other folks have made these decisions in terms of how, what are the limits on how many members of a political party can be elected? So I'm not touching it.
And I wouldn't leave it
Okay.
to the select board. Because that too can influence, if 2 out of the 3 are Democrats, which I think they are,
Yeah.
they could say, well, we want a board of Democrats. And
But they
But I-
can't.
And
But they
80%.
can't.
right,
Well,
but
they could do that, absolutely.
right. So I'm kind of leaning to a number. If I've got
Right.
5
Well-
people, I'm going 2, 2, and 1.
Yeah, right, because in your example, Ellen, it could be, four of the political party and then one sympathetic independent, right? That does it. So
But yeah, but you know what?
I'm
You
not
guys
gonna die on
are,
my sword over it though.
you guys are thwarting the will of the voters here because, and which that statute does as well. But when I say that, if you wanna write in here that it's gonna be 2 to 1, which is fine, but what if the voters are overwhelmingly one party or the other? Well, you've taken their political voice from them. You're saying you can't have the people on this board you want. You must have at least 2 members of the party that's out of favor. So why would we ever say that?
For balance.
But people don't want balance.
But, okay, I understand that, but that's why there are laws. People don't want to drive 25 miles per hour on ironworks. However, they're driving 40. If they get caught, there are laws to give balance.
Yeah, but that's a different kind of balance. This is, you're thwarting, there's only a couple of words I can use to describe this, and I don't mean them the way they're gonna come out, but it's an anti-democratic impulse, right? Because theoretically, the will of the Republicans sweep the elections. Well, they're gonna want, theoretically, no offense to the Republicans, but they're gonna want 4 out of 5 members on the board. Forget about the Republicans, the voters want that. That's who they've elected. And if they're told, we don't care how many votes you cast, you're getting 2 Democrats. Well, that's no good.
Okay, well, look at your Supreme
But this is
Court.
an
That's no
ethics
good.
commission. This is an ethics
Yeah.
commission.
I mean,
Well, I know, but
I see your point. But,
ethics doesn't live in one party or the other though, right? So,
right.
at least in town.
So then it shouldn't, there shouldn't be yeah, if it doesn't matter, it's almost a non-issue unless,
Well, that's my point of view, but it's not, it's a non-issue for me because it's already been decided in 2 different places. The charter and the state statute.
unless there's a dearth of ethics in a party, and then they can have up to 4 people in it. That's the only time we have the problem.
Yeah, and so I have an answer. I'm sure it's an inadequate answer, but my answer would be that the political processes would respond to that.
4 years
Right.
later, 2 years
4
later.
years, exactly. And that's the limitation on my point of view, but that's
Okay.
All right, so anyway, I'm gonna say this, when I may have mentioned to you guys in the past, this is a joke. I may have mentioned to you guys in the past that I was on the Board of Finance. Well, one of the rules that was decided long before I was ever there was you're never gonna have a meeting that goes more than 2 hours. And so we're at 2 hours.
I like
here,
it.
So in fact, we're over 2 hours, so we have already violated the rule.
yeah, we started late.
All right, so we're right there. We're right there. So anyway, I'm not convinced we finished that debate on section 16, but we started it, and so we got through, I'll say 4 and
Let's see.
3/4.
4 3/4. 4 3/4. Okay.
Because I think at the end of the day, these are just numbers, and it's not like, it is what it is, right?
Yeah.
Other people will weigh in on these numbers, and
Yes.
yeah, that's my opinion on this part.
So we're going to, we'll keep with our schedule. Our next meeting will be the first Monday of June.
Yeah.
Right? Okay. Unless anyone has a last word, I'm
No.
going to.
Thank you.
At 9:08, declare us adjourned.
Awesome.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a good month, everyone.
You too.
Bye.
Oops, what?